Osiris, resplendent with his tall, plumed crown, sits enthroned at the gate of the netherworld, surrounded by the court of immortals. Jackal-headed Anubis leads the deceased to him. Hawk-headed Horus stands in attendance of the final verdict on the soul's justification. Ibis-headed Thoth grasps the pen and tablet to record the judgment. Osiris, pointing his scepter of eternal kingship, the shepherd's crook, addresses the approaching soul. Enter, because you know. The myth of Osiris, judge of souls in the netherworld and shepherd to immortality, was at the heart of ancient Egypt. Yet, because of the peculiar nature of their religion, the Egyptians never took the trouble to write down or explain his myth. It was up to Greek philosopher Plutarch, who visited Egypt in the 1st century AD, to record the first continuous account of the myth of Osiris. In Egypt, the death and resurrection of Osiris were matters not to be divulged, a great mystery.
Hello, and welcome back into the portal. I'm Amber A.
And I'm Andrew McKay.
And we have some bonus material for you guys once again.
Yeah, it's fun to have so much stuff to talk about.
It's pretty much endless, like we already kind of referenced last episode.
With Egypt in general.
With ancient Egypt, there's just so many mysteries and so many cool things that people, like archaeologists and Egyptologists, have yet to really decipher. And they're making headway, and we're going to explore another underground environment in the vicinity of the Giza pyramids. And this one is called the Osiris Shaft. And I'm not...
I'm sorry.
We're not...
I'm sorry.
Anyways.
That was supposed to be dramatic effect.
Yes.
Okay,
anyways.
say it again. That's it.
I'm not saying it again.
Okay.
But anyways, so we're going to dive into this other sort of underground environment that was found in the vicinity. It is on the other side of the Giza complex, or Giza Plateau. So this one is actually found roughly between the Sphinx and the second pyramid, Khafre's pyramid, if I'm not mistaken. And it actually lies directly underneath the causeway that leads up to this pyramid.
Okay.
So it's very interesting. And it was actually first rediscovered, I'm not going to say it was discovered, in the 1930s. And no excavation really took place until the 1990s because of the extent of flooding inside of the chambers.
Interesting.
Yes. So Osiris's shaft.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Diving into that one. So I think what really opened the doors for this was, like, when we were doing the research for the episode, and we were looking into the Tomb of the Birds and this idea that it could have been Osiris's underworld.
Yeah.
And so we're obviously doing our due diligence, looking all sorts of places on the internet, and came across this Osiris shaft. And initially I was confused because I thought they were referring to the same, because you do get that reference in Colin's account when he was exploring the Tomb of the Birds initially, and he describes this descending shaft. It was like a vertical shaft that went down, and he wasn't able to explore it. And so I actually was kind of confused, and I thought that this was the shaft. Different shaft.
Yeah.
How many times have I said shaft so far in this episode?
I don't know. We should be keeping a tally.
Every time,
maybe I'll start.
Yeah, every time Amber says shaft, everyone has to drink. But anyways, so this is really fascinating, and it has several different layers, this particular network.
Okay.
And it has been properly excavated by a team in the 1990s, I said before, 1999, with Dr. Hawass. He was the one that led this excavation.
Yes.
And it's super fascinating. There definitely has been some videos that have surfaced on YouTube in recent months because it has been just reopened.
Like, I can't remember exactly which month, but in 2017.
It was November 2017.
Okay, there you go. Late 2017.
Yeah.
Crazy. That is so recent. That's insane.
Very recent.
We need to go to Egypt.
And I think maybe what had like, people are trying to, like, hype it up, being like, oh, what have they been keeping secrets from us for so long? But I think it has more to do with the stability of the water table and the danger factor for people going down there.
Yeah, and that totally makes sense.
Yeah.
But it also raises other questions, too, potentially, along the line of thought that the pyramids are in a certain location because of rising water tables and possibly to utilize water in a certain way.
That's just it. Yeah, that's one of the main theories, and we'll get into that.
Yes.
But to start off, Osiris's shaft. So, people kind of called it the Osiris's shaft because there is a sarcophagus that is in the lowest layer. There's 3 different layers. So the first layer is pretty, like, the first chamber is pretty...
what was the total, like, length of this again?
Like, downwards?
Yeah.
Into the earth? I think it was over 200 feet.
Right. Which is... That's 20 stories, right? Like, that's 20 plus stories. That's pretty big.
It's pretty big stuff.
Anyway, continue.
But, yeah. So, the first chamber doesn't really have too much going on. There wasn't really much discoveries found. But, in the second descending chamber, there was actually this interesting... It was like 6 alcoves or niches.
Yes.
And there was these 2 stone boxes found that each weighed approximately 30 tons. And they were made of... Some people were trying to say that it was made of materials found outside of the Egyptian area. Other people were saying that it was granite or basalt. So, again, that is kind of contested. And the video we were watching where he claimed it was from a source outside of Egypt, I feel like he's just trying to sell tours.
Probably. But hey, we in the episode, though, we touched on the idea that the Egyptians were harvesting metals from meteorites. Could something have been constructed with space rock?
Space rocks.
I don't know.
Who knows?
Who knows?
But those are more metals, not actual...
True. Very true. Anyway, it's just a thought.
So, getting back to, so we've discovered... Well, we've gotten down to the second level. And then in the third level, it actually descends into this... partially water-filled chamber that actually has a third, what's referred to as a sarcophagus. And this is actually really interesting because there were human remains found in some of these granite boxes by Dr. Hawass when he excavated in 1999. And so this just kind of leads people to think that these were burial. This was a tomb.
Right.
Of some sort, a tomb to Osiris. And it's not to say this is the only tomb to Osiris, because there was multiples, and that goes back to the mythology of Osiris when he was actually murdered. He was originally the ruler of the Earth realm, married to Isis, which was actually his sister, and then his brother Seth was kind of jealous. He wasn't really doing as well as his brother was. Apparently his brother had taught the Egyptians to farm wheat, and then Isis was very skilled as well, and she taught the Egyptians to make bread out of the wheat, all this kind of stuff. And then Seth was kind of like, I'm kind of jealous about that, and so he ended up tricking his brother and murdering him. And then Isis went to regenerate him, and Seth caught wind of that and actually hacked his brother up into about 14 different pieces and scattered him across Egypt. And that kind of represents the different temples or tombs that were, or shrines, I should say, in erected in his honor.
Right.
So you will see different tombs around Egypt that are dedicated to Osiris simply for this reason. But anyway, so
that's
this is one
interesting.
of them.
Because that could be really confusing, obviously.
And another really interesting fact that kind of, it's not very PG, but apparently the only part, because like Isis, his wife, once he was dismembered, she actually transformed herself into a kite and flew over Egypt with her sister. I can't remember the name of her. It was like Nephratis or something.
Nephrites?
Nephrites,
Is that what the river's named after then?
Oh, no, I don't think so. I think it was different. But anyway, so she was a kite, and she went and sailed all over Egypt in search of all these parts. And she managed to reconstruct or remember Osiris, except for one part, which was his member.
The member.
Yeah, so
that was... The shaft, so to speak.
Yeah, the shaft. We found it.
Discovered. Yeah.
So that was very interesting. But anyways, there's this whole other part about this divine conception between her and Osiris, and how they actually they gave birth to this child that was called the Savior of the World. What does that remind you of?
Yeah, common themes.
Exactly, yeah, it reminds me of Christian mythologies. But anyways, that is kind of a side note. we don't want to get too off track here, right?
No.
Way.
No, but that wasn't... I found that really interesting, because I found myself getting really confused in a lot of this research just because some stuff sort of sounds like people are describing the same place, and then obviously, this epiphany that there actually are so many different shrines to Osiris, and that can definitely get confusing.
Exactly. And so, getting back to this not shrine, these chambers, yeah, and all this good stuff. Good stuff. Good stuff. Dr. Zahi A. Hawass, he was actually the part of the Supreme Council of Antiquities at the time, and I don't know if he still is or not, but he goes into great detail. We're going to include a lot of these images from his report that he published through... Yeah. Let's see here, if I can dig up the actual... I don't know what the journal was, but anyways, it was a peer-reviewed publication.
Oh yeah, and we'll have it posted, obviously.
Exactly, I have the link right here in front of me. I'm just kind of shuffling through it. But he goes through a detailed description of all the archaeological components of the tomb.
Yes.
And the different layers. And so you get a really good idea of what was lying there when it was first kind of like, now these videos that we're seeing on YouTube there's no artifacts left.
Oh, of course not.
It's just the 30 ton.
Yeah, of course.
The sarcophagi or whatever you want to refer to them as.
Right. And even those artifacts that are have been taken away. They're now obviously in Cairo, most likely, in the Museum of Antiquities. You can't see that stuff. You can't get to those levels. It's not on display. There's 2 floors available, and the rest is off limits. So
what? No, the entire thing is available to view.
No, I'm sorry. I'm talking about the museum in Cairo.
Oh,
where a lot of these artifacts would be taken, like the stuff that's obviously no longer in these chambers, and a lot of it isn't available to the public, right? A lot of it is just
human remains.
Yeah, and stuff that would still necessarily need, it would need analysis, so obviously it's not going to be in, a display case necessarily.
Yeah.
But it is sort of interesting along this line of just, mystery and sort of keeping things away from the public, you only have access to certain spots at the museum too, same as with the actual sites, which makes sense.
Exactly. So he actually ended up dating a lot of these artifacts to the 26th dynasty of the Egyptian period, which would have been quite late.
Yeah.
So it would have actually coincided just before the Persian conquest of Egypt. And I'm
right
not saying that...
before Herodotus came on the
Exactly, scene. Herodotus. And he actually... I've come across several references to Herodotus in the... I was diving deep into, Osiris mythology and all this stuff.
Yeah.
It was really fun to come across Herodotus again, because I feel like he's our old buddy.
He's just around he's Where's Waldo? He's just kind of, in every story. It's oh yeah, Herodotus wrote about that, and it's really? And then there he is, just, standing behind a tree. Just yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
Anyway.
Yeah. So anyways, I know I lost my train of thought.
I'm sorry. I'm distracting.
Yeah. So I think one of the main things I found really interesting about these boxes, these stone, granite, whether granite's basalt, I don't know, they're whatever.
Yeah.
Some of them are damaged, and there's actually video footage that shows the damage and shows how it almost seems as if there was an explosion that came from the inside and kind of rocked it and damaged the lid. And also there was this very sticky, resinous looking substance that was quite dark that was on the inside and the sides of one of the boxes found in the second chamber.
Yeah.
And as well, it was also splattered on the ceiling above.
Yeah.
And this guy Forster that runs these Egyptian tours and stuff like that, I think he calls them hidden Inca tours or something. He described it as basically not your typical grave robbing damage. And
okay, yeah.
He kind of points to the fact that there might have been an explosion of sorts. It just doesn't seem very natural. And there's nothing really in peer-reviewed publications to explain it that I could come across.
It's just sort of swept under the rug a little bit.
Yes. And I will just say, take what this dude Forrester says with a grain of salt, because he was actually trying to claim at one point in his video that these boxes, these chests or whatever, or sarcophagi, whatever you want to refer to them as, were actually made of a material that was not found anywhere in Egypt.
Yeah.
So he's trying to hype it up a bit, I think.
But then it's I kind of mentioned before when we were just reviewing the notes, that what you can mean by that is kind of that's sort of it's sexier way of saying that, like, yeah, it didn't come from Egypt, like, when we look at Egypt now, because it came from, like, another neighboring North African country that, like, would have been ancient Egypt still. You know what I mean? It's like, but it wasn't from Egypt, it's from another place. It just sounds, like, more exotic and...
Totally.
And, but...
Yeah.
Because like you said before, I think, like, most people think it's basalt granite, which is from Egypt.
It's commonly referred to, like, Dr. Hawass referred to it as that, so I kind of take his...
Right.
His answer for what it
but he also, this forester dude, he points out the things that, like we mentioned in the episode, the idea of saw marks and cut marks in the same vicinity of these boxes and things like that, and evidence of technologies that
maybe the Egyptians weren't capable of.
Right.
Like, not to say that it was aliens or anything like that, but like it could have been a more ancient culture that preceded the Egyptians in some way, shape, or form. Yeah. And the Egyptians kind of inherited it, is kind of the idea. But yeah, there's definitely a couple lines of thought, I would say. One is the one we just touched on. Yeah, a precursor civilization constructed these shafts and the Egyptians inherited it.
Right.
Another is the more mainstream view that the shafts were constructed somewhere between 600 and 500 BC. And
that just seems so recent.
It seems kind of bizarre to me because I feel, in my mind, they had to have been around during the times that the pyramids themselves were being constructed, so that would place it further to like 3000 BC. And that makes sense because one of the theories is actually that these caves were... they provided shortcuts for priests and things like that to maybe
that is so cool. Underground. That is like the coolest thing ever. Like a little escape passageway underneath. And like that's why this is also fascinating, just to like be very, very clear, because this is a bonus episode, to tie it to the Giza Underworld full-length episode. Like, we're going into this stuff because we're trying to find the significance of things like these boxes at the bottom of the Osiris shaft and stuff like that, to build on this idea that there was more to the physical underworld that they were developing, and whether or not they were building off of things left behind from even more ancient peoples, like you just said, and how much further these go. If there's collapsed tunnels that used to be there that are now no longer there.
The shifting, geologic shifts of the earth, and who knows.
Wars and all kinds of stuff, flooding.
Or even modern technology, like you mentioned, when they built the, not the Panama Canal.
The Suez.
The Suez Canal. Yeah. What sort of implications that would have had further down the way, or whatever, I don't know. And just modern technology,
things could be buried and lost, and what I mean, like, collapsed, right? Like, if there were further tunnels extending out into the underworld.
And for me, it kind of comes down to, like, did these serve a religious function? Did they serve a technological function? Like, I feel like there's two different lines of thought you could go with that.
Because it's inconclusive if it's just a tomb. Like, right? Like, and that's it. Like, is it... Is it
a tomb? Was it a tomb for multiple priests, maybe? Because you get those 6 alcoves, and there was 2 boxes left. What the heck happened to the other ones, then, if there was anything in those alcoves? That's kind of the question I have. Yeah. And then, of course, when you descend into the 3rd chamber that's covered in water, you get another sarcophagus that is completely empty.
And this thing with water is fascinating to me, right? And the fact that there's this water... I mean, obviously there's groundwater, but like, you're going down underneath the ground, you're beneath the pyramid, and there had to have been more significance to that. And we've had some listeners.
Are you thinking spiritual or technological?
Both, potentially. Yeah. Right? Because I feel like even if they did have technological capabilities that we didn't think they were capable of, inherited or however they came about it, that would have played into their spirituality, definitely. Right? Yeah. I mean, it's our religion now, technology, right? Like, we are, right? Like, the way, like, our version of it, you know what I mean? It would have been very much more literal for them, like, where it's, they've come up with some power, they've figured something out, and they're grateful for it, right? Somebody's responsible for it, so the Ra or whoever.
Right, exactly. Because any sort of achievement would usually be ascribed to the heavenly...
and they had a good idea on life. The Egyptians. I take back what I said early on in that first episode, where I was like, they had sort of a dark outlook, and like, compared to some other civilizations, like, I can't off the top of my head think of any, which is dumb, I should have written it down, but there's obviously some that like take a much more light-hearted view on death, right? And that's like, than having to cross the lakes of fire and go through these types of things, right?
And it's so funny. Well, sorry,
but just to fit, but like, what you get to at the end of that is so beautiful. You get to experience life just the way it is now.
Life, and just live it.
Just
and
live
there's
it.
no end to
You're
it.
planting your crops.
You're in the afterlife.
You're peaceful. You get to see the sunset and sunrise,
Yeah.
and that's it.
I would highly recommend anyone who hasn't already checked out our resource / I think it's on our blog actually for this week. At the end of our blog, there is a link to this video that is an illustrated, or it's not illustrated, it's an animated rendering of what happens to you when you go through the Duat or
It's
the
really
afterlife.
cool.
It's really well done.
Yeah.
And it's really short.
It's a
It's
short
like
video.
4 minutes, and he does a really good job of explaining it in a very entertaining fashion.
Yeah.
So I'd highly recommend that, just so people can get a better grasp of what this meant. Because at the end, you're right. What the final test is, you plant your seeds, you plant your crop, and then if you're successful with that, then you just keep going.
Yep.
Just keep going. And I even, I was getting into more of the ideas of water related to ancient Egypt, and how the annual flooding of the Nile was a huge event for them, and they actually created these wells that would measure the flooding levels, and there was different cubic measurements. So if they had 12 cubic, it was famine, starvation. If it was 14, it was pretty good. If it was 15, spot on. 16, it was going to be a great year. And then anything above that obviously would spell catastrophe, because you get flooding, and, unnecessarily flooding and that type of thing.
Yeah.
So
but that's another
it was very
thing.
central for their life.
Totally.
That's the point I was trying to make.
The idea of flooding, though, too, is another interesting thing in terms of talking about the pyramids and water, and there's a couple of little ideas we're going to get to in just a sec. Mm-hmm. But when the water could have been, say, at a point where it would flood areas they didn't want it to, mm-hmm. they built canals and stuff, right? They built man-made, the diversions of the water to mm-hmm. either, obviously irrigate crops or whatever. Mm-hmm. And there's sort of ideas out there that they may have also done this. Actually, I don't even know if it's definitive or not, because it was an article that I was looking at earlier on, and I don't even
Was it on the History Channel?
Don't get me started. But I don't even think I ended up using it for the first episode, but it was just this idea that there was evidence that there was canals dug running to the pyramids to fill them. And it's sort of along the idea of the battery, the generating energy.
Should we get into that then? Because I think that's a very prominent, I've been watching some videos, The Universe Inside You, I was just watching that one where...
Right. And we're getting into a couple of things here that aren't necessarily tied directly to the mythology of the underworld and searching for a literal underworld, but it's just sort of all fallen together down the rabbit hole in terms of what the heck are these things for? Why are they there? And how old are they? And all these other things, all ties together.
Yeah.
So
could this have been, connected to the function of the pyramids that was something other than a tomb?
Yes.
That's kind of what the premise of this is.
Yes.
And we actually had a listener contribution from Life H, one of our buds.
Yeah.
And he put forth the idea that the pyramids were exactly that, more than just tombs for pharaohs, but could have been generators. Exactly that, because the water table was a lot higher at the time, and potentially could have been harnessed as a potential power source.
Yeah.
And that video I was watching, it seems kind of the girl, the narrator from The Universe Inside You, she kind of put it out there. She's like, why would you need, if you have, the King's Chamber, I'm talking about the Great Pyramid, right, where you get the King's Chamber, you get the Queen's Chamber directly below. Mm-hmm. This is the same pyramid we were talking about, or no, were we talking about that? Yeah, we were, with the hollow void that wasn't discovered yet, or hasn't been excavated.
Yeah, that's the biggest.
So this is the same pyramid, and so she was questioning, she's like, why do you need a descending tunnel into just nothing at the bottom underground? That doesn't make much sense unless it's a channel, you're channeling water into it, and then there's these other shafts and things that potentially could be harnessed. And the fact that she also mentioned that at one point when the pyramids were constructed, they were actually coated in a oh my gosh, what am I trying to say? They were coated in something that you use for battery. It's the coating, right? Not the insulator.
Yeah.
It's insulating the pyramids, and it was this really light colored sandstone, I think.
Right.
And the rest of it is granite in the inside, which is actually a little bit radioactive.
Interesting.
Apparently.
Yeah.
So she was saying well, if these are insulated battery cells that could have been filled with water, this is much more worth it, right, than just building a tomb. But for me, it comes back to the whole, like, religious versus technological. Like, I feel like religious motivations are equally strong in a society.
Absolutely.
At some point, so you know what I mean?
For sure.
Both
but this
those,
ties
yeah.
back into the Forrester find that you mentioned earlier on, and obviously that strange substance on the boxes potentially, right?
Yes.
Because there's an idea that these boxes may have been parts of the larger battery or power generating system. And here's the thing, just as not a disclaimer, because I'm open to this idea, because we have some proof for it, and we'll give it in just a sec, but this sort of definitely is linked to like the ancient alien kind of camp of thinking about right, ancient Egypt and ancient peoples and stuff, and be like, you know, they take the idea of it being potentially like a battery or this sort of thing we're talking about and amplify it by 1,000,000. You know what I mean? Like they're like they're implying that it was almost like it was used for things so beyond like far, but like, why couldn't it have just been used for something simple, right? Like if they're figured out a way to generate energy, maybe it could have just been used to aid in the construction of the pyramid itself,
or even in the creation of fine jewelry, like metallurgy, that type of thing.
Yeah, or just simple stuff like that. Just for burials or for whatever, for ceremonial purposes or for generating light,
or
if
for
they
even
figured
for
it out somehow, like
for some sort of religious display as well.
Sure,
you know,
like it doesn't have to be some just so profound. Like it is profound, but it doesn't have to be like, you know what I mean? Like
so
it
the
doesn't.
Proof of this is the Baghdad battery. Is that what you're gonna...
Yeah. More or less.
Which is really cool, and it was actually featured on Mythbusters, and they were able to generate 4.5 volts of energy.
From 4 kind of like cairns or whatever.
Yeah, so what they were, it was like these big pots, these pottery ceramics, and they had
lemon juice
had lemon juice as the conductive material or conductive liquid.
Yeah.
And then they had it basically submerged, so that was filled in the pot, and then they had a tube of copper, and then in the tube was the iron rod. And they were able to conduct electricity through that. And then in the videos we were watching, there was like, it was sealed, right? Like the top of it was sealed with like almost like a resinous type substance, and this
similar
same
kind of a
type
substance.
of substance could have, it was seen in that video, and people
and they said, I mean, it's like 4.5 volts is not a lot of power, but it's also just from 4 small pots.
So what if you get to the scale of the pyramids?
And at that point, you know, if you're going by the typical Egyptologist dating of the pyramid, like even then, it was the tallest structure in the ancient world, the biggest pyramid, the Khufu Giza. Mm-hmm. That's a big old thing. If not necessarily the whole thing is a battery, that's a big battery, right? Like it's bigger than 4 pots.
Yeah.
And if I don't know, I'm definitely entertaining this as an idea, and
I want to do more. I want to dig more.
And it does tie into also. I'm still on the fence for the power tools, right? Although we've seen sort of the arguments for the cut marks and stuff, and it does look strange. Mm-hmm. It doesn't look like.
Looks like
handmade, right? It doesn't. No. It looks like, and it's
very uniform.
Yeah, and there's nobody coming out and saying, "Yeah, no, that was from the 50s when people were down there doing whatever."
Digging around,
right?
Yeah.
There's no evidence of that.
No.
So that's very curious. I'm still obviously on the fence with that. You need more evidence for that. Mm-hmm. But this whole Baghdad battery thing kind of makes me think
gives credence to it.
It does, and like, you know. They were diverting water, and there was water there, and it was of significance. So we don't know exactly what these chambers or these pots were for, these containers, but it was something significant.
Something very significant.
And it was linked to the underworld. Because it was...
a spiritual, and that's where the spirituality, I get back to that, because my sort of far-out theory is that what if this was some sort of, like, spiritual bathhouse? Because these sarcophaguses, as they're described by many, are obviously the size of a human being. They were found in caves. Caves usually serve a spiritual purpose in a culture, and obviously they were in ancient Egypt. There were so many tombs, like in caves, along, like, you know, cut into the Valley of the Kings, that type of thing.
Yep.
And so my idea is that, what if this was a spiritual bathhouse where one could like descend into the underworld to have a religious experience? And I feel like those 6 niches or alcoves in the second chamber that contain the 2 sarcophaguses could have even been like deprivation chambers or something, you know what I mean?
Right.
To kind of help people like invigorate their senses and kind of like hone them in, and then
That makes sense,
I don't know.
actually.
And you do get modern examples today, like float wellness. We have that in town. And there's many versions of it.
Sensory deprivation things.
Exactly. So you can, like, enhance your senses and feel as though you're descending into a spiritual place.
Yeah.
And obviously monks would do this all the time. Like, Tibetan monks, they'd go into a cave, they'd have religious experiences, come out. And I just feel like this could be a very plausible... Yeah. Because there's that other idea that the priests were using it for their own purposes, for whatever, if they were using it as underground passages or storage chambers or whatever.
Right.
So all very, very cool.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I like that. I like that theory. I think that makes sense. I think archaeologists and more mainstream people would probably be happier with that theory than other theories necessarily. But I mean, that makes sense too, right? Like, just to go back to like what we mentioned in the episode, like the Egyptians sort of saw the world as a disc, and there was sort of like, almost for the Stranger Things fans out there, like the upside down as the underworld or the afterlife or whatever. So to descend into these chambers was getting them physically closer to that plane crossing into the underworld or the upside down or whatever.
I feel like that's totally plausible.
And that matched with their ethos and everything like that. And it makes sense that it would be a spiritual shrine-like place. It's not our conception of like, oh, you're having to go down to like a dark, scary place or something. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
It's not like,
it's almost like a preparation.
Whereas comparatively, we have like, say, like Castle Hoska in the Czech Republic, where you have this descending pit, but it's all associated with pagan sort of things, and it's a gateway to hell. You're descending into hell, and hell's not a good place.
No.
But for the ancient Egyptians, this was a different story.
Exactly. And you know what's interesting too? Like, another theory is that this place is actually just a symbolic tomb where pharaohs and commoners alike could pay homage to Osiris, because that's kind of the idea, is that Osiris's tomb is in the bottom chamber, and it was a tomb, a shrine to him. And again, so that just makes me think that obviously this is a religious place.
Possibly.
And so...
And even if it is, though, I still think the idea that maybe there were ancient batteries being used down there, maybe that had something to do with whatever was going on.
Maybe they thought it was, really, like, spiritual power. I don't know.
Maybe.
I'm not an ancient Egyptian. I wish I could go live a day in the life
Don't
of,
you
though.
wish you could just be a fly on the wall?
Right?
The money I would pay.
It's
I don't have
so
it,
cool.
But...
So this is two underground not underground worlds, but two underground sites in the same vicinity of the pyramids.
Yeah.
There's probably a lot more out there. If anyone has heard of any, please let us know. Reach out to us. We'd love to hear about it.
Yeah.
And give us your thoughts. Give us your theories on this, because it's really, really cool. And
let us know if you think that this will go any further.
Yeah.
Do you think that...
Because there is the idea that there was one horizontal shaft that they said just ended in a dead end. They actually sent a little boy down to explore it.
How did that story go exactly?
Well, yeah, they sent a boy down on a rope. And then he crawled into this horizontal shaft, and he just said it was a dead end. But what if that's just a collapsed tunnel? What if that's, you know what I mean? Like,
that's kind of like what Andrew Collins, like, sort of, that's kind of like the same sort of end he got to,
and
right?
Like Caviglia, when they got to those three big chambers underground, and then there was tunnels descending further.
Yeah.
Where the heck did those
go? And that
go?
was in the 1800s, so what had changed from then to the 90s when other things were being excavated and things like that, right? You don't know. We don't know.
We don't know, but we would love to hear from you if you have any ideas.
Yes.
Or you listeners over there.
Yeah. So hit us up on Twitter. You can DM us. We're at Into the Portal 1 and at AmberRay1992. You can always email us at intotheportalmailbox@gmail.com. And make sure to check us out at intotheportal.com. We have the blog up on there, our bookstore, and all of our resources too, so you can see all the same stuff that we're looking at.
Yeah. So we're going to post all this, we have a bunch of different diagrams and photographs and things of this Osiris shaft that we will make available to all you.
Yeah.
So make sure you go to the website, www.intotheportal.com. And we'll be back on Sunday with a whole new episode. We're really excited about this one. It's going to be another cryptid creature.
Yeah, we're coming back around to the cryptid creatures
exactly. Again. We gotta go to there sometimes. So anyways, we just wanted to reiterate, if you're loving the show, please leave us a review. I was actually just on scouring iTunes, foreign iTunes from different countries, and I found some really awesome nuggets of just greatness that I was so appreciative of.
Totally made.
So we're gonna shout all of you guys out on Sunday, so look forward to it.
Yeah. So thanks again for listening, and we'll see you guys soon.
was a podcast from the Podfix Network. You can check out more shows like it at podfixnetwork.com.